Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Huddle. You know, I heard that Elton John got a treadmill for his pet rabbit. It's a little fit bunny. Boom, boom. Take us away, Lizev. Get the spotlight off me quick. I don't have my co-host here to laugh at me. Come on, y'all. I need some laughter.
We'll forgive you for that one, Kat.
Come on.
The little fit bunny.
That's right.
It was awesome. I love it. That was terrible.
There we go. There we go.
That was very terrible. That was one of the best.
I loved it.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Wednesdays on the Daily Huddle, where we talk about relationships and communication. My co-host is off traveling today, so it's just me with our wonderful guest. And before I introduce Christine Miles, I have a couple of questions for people. Let's see. Tom, I'm going to start with you. What time is it?
Okay. Is now.
That's right. The time
No better
is
time.
now. That's right. That helps us get present, get here and in the moment. I think I heard Gio out there. So Gio, I have a question for you. I would like to know, where are you and what you're grateful for?
Kathryn, thank you for asking. Where am I? I am right here. I am here. The only place I can be, right where I need to be, exactly where I need to be. And what am I grateful for? I am grateful for ceilings. I'm grateful for ceilings.
Okay.
Yes.
You know, I'm grateful for ceilings too. Thank you, Gio. That's wonderful. And now I'm going to toss it over to my wonderful friend, Stan, who I love seeing each Wednesday morning. Stan, how are you? And who are you going to hug today?
I am. Oh man, I'm grateful.
Oh,
I'm grateful because I am, as I say, I am.
that's
And
right.
I'm gonna hug my beautiful wife again this morning.
Wonderful. Oh, she's lucky. Thank you, Stan.
Thank you.
I love that. I feel that gratitude. I'm gonna soak that up, feel it myself. All right, let's dive in. Super excited about this topic today with Christine Miles. Question is, how much time do you spend talking versus listening? And let me tell you a little bit about Christine. Super excited to have her here today. She's an author and professional keynote speaker, consultant, executive coach, thought leader, entrepreneur, and recognized world expert in the field of listening differently. Christine has helped thousands of executives, individuals, and families expand human connections, transforming businesses and lives. She holds a BS in psychology from Millersville University, a master in psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, and a certificate in structural family therapy from the Philadelphia Child Guidance Center. Christine is the founder and owner of Equipt, a consulting and training business for medium-sized to Fortune 100 corporations. And she also hosts the #1 business radio show on the East Coast, Executive Leaders Radio. She's the author of the award-winning book, What Is It Costing You Not to Listen? And is the creator of The Listening Path, a game-changing approach to transform how people listen, empathize, and understand. And she is based outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Kathryn. That's cool. It's always hard when somebody reads your resume.
It is, right?
It's a lot of
Funny.
expectation.
I always like to cut it short, but then I read yours and I'm like, I don't know, it's all so good and juicy. I wanted to read it all. So yeah, so what is it? How much time do you spend talking versus listening? This is a really great question. And I just want you to dive in and tell us why this question, what's important about this?
Well, it's part of why I wrote the book and why I named the book what I named it. What is it costing you not to listen? Because you can't solve a problem you don't know you have. And we are told to listen. We are not taught. So from a very early age, listen, listen, listen up. Our teachers say it, our parents say it. It's expected and told, but not taught. So if we start to just lens back and ask ourselves the question, are we listening and how much are we listening in conversations, whether it's with our spouse, our children, with our business partners, our colleagues, our customers, we're at least starting to look at the problem. And when we know we have a problem, we know what it is, then we can start to repair it and fix it.
Okay. So why is it a problem? I mean, everybody listens, right? I mean, let's like dive into that. Everybody listens, but why is it a problem?
Well, I would say everybody hears. Well, not everybody hears. Obviously, there's people who have hearing impairment, but I think, the difference between hearing and listening is significant. And so we treat listening much like we treat walking, that we have legs, so we learn to walk eventually, like it's going to happen unless, again, there's an issue. But with listening, it's different. We have ears doesn't mean we're going to learn how to listen. It means we're going to take in sound. It doesn't mean that we're going to get the meaning. Listening is about getting the meaning. And we're only retaining 17 to 25% of what we hear, even when we're hearing it. So we're not hearing everything. And then we're only retaining 17 to 25%. So we're not doing well. And I believe it's costing us a lot in our relationships. I call it death by 1,000 cuts. We see the demise of relationships over time. And a lot of the fundamentals come down to not feeling heard, seen, and understood. And at the core of that is how we listen to one another. So we lose a lot and a lot of missed opportunities that we're not even aware of.
Gosh, it's so important what you're saying. And before we go down the path of sort of how do we learn to listen better, how did you get here? Like, why listening, and how did you land? Yeah, tell us about that.
That's a good question, and I appreciate it. So we all have a story, right? So my backstory, my listening started very early in life. I can remember as early as 5. So that was my first memory. So 2 major influences, and the primary one being my mother, who, I grew up in Hershey, very idyllic in many ways, but I had a mother who had mental health issues. And what I saw was a woman who was very beautiful and warm and charismatic and loving on the surface, but underneath there was this tremendous pain. She had lost her mother from childbirth. So she, was set up very inherently to have a lot of issues. And so what people didn't see was this deep pain that she suffered from with this exterior that was so beautiful and loving. And my job in the family, with some burden, was to understand that dichotomy, especially as the girl in the family, since she lost her mother. And so I started paying attention to things that were below the surface from a very early age. And as early as high school, I started to know that I was being successful in areas that I shouldn't have really been that successful in, because I had this as a thread that it helped turbocharge any kind of average skills I had. I was becoming more successful, and that was on the sports field or overcoming my own academic challenges. I went to Penn. I really had no right getting into Penn in the first place because the scores weren't there. I mean, I'm smart, but I had some learning challenges. And so that was a single thread in my success. And over time, I started to realize that a lot of the problems I saw in businesses, I started working in businesses and with families, again, were the failure of knowing how to listen like I was taught. So now I have an organization that really helps people learn to do just that so they can be more successful. Wow.
It's so interesting. It's like what traumatizes you can also be your superpower.
It's a gift. I thought it for so long. I thought it was intuitive. People would tell me, "Oh, you're so intuitive." What I've realized as I've deconstructed it is that I was taught this from a young age. My nieces are on the picture and behind me, and they're younger, and I see them doing a lot of the same things, like inherently, because my father was also a very good listener. He was a business person. He was taught how to listen, both through therapy, he would tell you, and also from his training when he was trained as a salesperson at Connecticut General. They really taught him how to do that. And so I watched him, and we had a lot of language around that. So most of us aren't raised that way. We're told, not taught. So when you give people the right tools, they can learn very quickly. Simple, not easy. You have to practice it. But it's such a gap. Think about 0 years of education in our school systems on listening. I asked somebody yesterday, I was in Jacksonville, and I said, "How many of you have had listening training?" And a gentleman raised his hand and said, "I have." And he was a personal trainer. He said listening was a big part of this. And he kept talking. He goes, "Come to think of it, it was about 2 hours we had on listening." I said, "That's usually what happens." And he said, "I thought it was more than that, but it really wasn't."
Right. So we don't have a ton of time, and I want to, learn and also give that gift to others. So what do you teach people? Like, how do you What are the tools? How do you learn to listen better?
Well, I think that when people, they have a story, it's like history. Some people will say, I didn't like history or I loved history. And the reason usually is because if their teacher taught them in stories versus not in stories. So that's
Mhm,
part of what we
mhm.
use as a vehicle. So the real story is we're going into conversations completely unprepared. And
Mhm.
so the story we tell or I tell is, imagine you were on a mountain and you were going hiking or backpacking for 3 weeks, and you had to get from one side of the mountain to the other, and you had to be the guide. Well, you wouldn't go in without stuff in your backpack. You'd have a sleeping bag, a tent, you'd have a water filter, and all kinds of tools. So for the conversation, you need tools in your backpack as well. And that's why we call it the listening path. It's really the path to understanding. And there's 6 tools in the backpack that you need to take on this path to really let the story and the insight come to you. So that's how we teach it. That metaphor is the guide in every conversation. And one of the things you need is really a map of the conversation. How do I know how to guide you in the conversation so that I can understand you? That's the first step. It's really know where you're going.
So the ultimate goal is, I mean, if you had to bottom line, is understanding, is really understanding the other person. And is it more than that? Is it understanding what they're trying to say, understanding what they're not saying, but meaning to, or is it really just?
It's both. It can be
Mhm.
both. Sometimes people know they have an insight already and you have to help them discover it. And sometimes you're discovering it together. You know this from your coaching work, right? And in relationships, sometimes it's to solve a problem, but you can't solve a problem with somebody until you understand them, because you need to earn the right to do that. One of the fundamental principles is try telling somebody what to do and they'll tell you why they can't do it. So we're taught to tell, but telling doesn't work. And for some reason, we think by telling it will. And instead, the reflex is, instead of doing that, is to go, let me understand you first, and then together I can help you come to the solution. This is a common problem in relationships. I just want you to listen. No, I want to solve the problem. Well,
Right.
it's really both. It's really both. Listening isn't a passive endeavor where you're just letting somebody vent. It's really so that you can connect and find the common place of understanding. And when somebody feels understood, not agreed with, by the way, this is not about agreement. This is about, I get you. I understand you, your situation. And then we have a completely different paradigm.
So if I'm in conversation, is this any conversation? Because it sounds a little contrived, like I need to know where I'm going in the conversation to get there. So is this like you and I are just having a conversation on the street and now suddenly I'm calculating where I want to go, or?
It's really, so it's more like, imagine it's at any conversation, but imagine you're watching a movie. All right. So when you watch a movie, we tend to enter conversations in the middle. We meet people in the middle of their movie all day long, right? Whether they're telling us about a problem or we're meeting them for the first time. And so when you're watching a movie, when you start in the middle, you tend to be confused, right? You don't know where it began, what's happening, but we think that's the beginning of the movie so often. And so when I say you need to know where you're going, you have to kind of know what the map is of the movie. And every conversation is a story, whether it's a 10-second story or a 3-hour story, it's always a story. And so part of the map is understanding how story is a big vehicle to really unlocking a different kind of conversation. And part of that is getting the beginning. And so one of the questions and one of the tools we teach, and this is just one of what we call the 6 most powerful questions, or the compass, so that we don't get lost in the woods, is take me back, or take me back to the beginning. So that when somebody starts to share or talk, whether that's at the grocery store or your kid, instead of starting with where they are, you go, hold on, okay, can you just take me back? Where did this begin?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's powerful. I could see how that would unlock a lot. And I like what you're saying about being in the middle of the story, because, one of my favorite quotes is, don't judge somebody based on what chapter you entered, started reading their book, or,
That's right.
we butchered it.
We
But,
expect people to know us and understand us
right.
from where we are, when really it's the beginning of the story that shapes the narrative and who we are. And so that's a big part of it.
So it sounds like one of the tools are the 6 most powerful questions. What are some other tools that you can share with us to, like, just the mini version of taking us to being a better listener?
Sure. Well, I want to share one more of those questions because these are the questions that journalists and therapists and coaches use, by the way, because they're master story gatherers. So if you watch a really good interview like you're doing now, you're asking the right questions to see where we're oriented. Another really important question is, how does that make you feel? We tend to just forget about feelings and just chase facts when we're listening. And when we ask the feeling questions, it opens up the connection as well as a big part of the story. So even if you just add those two questions to when you're listening, it's game changing.
Wow. Okay. How does that make you feel? And take me back to the beginning. Okay. That's great.
So one of the things you're doing, and just as another tool, and this may seem kind of basic in terms of what we might know about listening. This is very different than just active listening where we're paying attention. This is really about, again, finding the meaning in the conversation.
Okay.
One of the key missing tools or in your backpack when we're listening is really to make sure that we're aligned. And so it's about knowing how to reflect back what you heard and not just repeating the words, but repeating the story. Again, whether that's 10 seconds or 90 seconds, it's like, I want to make sure I understand both the facts and the feelings of your story as it relates to where we are in the movie. That's a missing, we call that the flashlight. Let me shine a light on what you just said and make sure that I understand you, rather than just saying things like, I understand. Like people say that a lot, and I go, nothing makes me feel less understood than when you tell me you understand. Here's what will make me feel like you understand. Let me see if I understand, Kathryn. You know, you're wondering, how do people in a conversation really change the way they have the conversation? What are the tools? Take us on the path. And if you know that, then you can really change the conversation. And so, do I get you? That's really
Yeah.
So now we understand each other differently because I repeated what you, in a meaningful way, back what you said, right?
Right. Well, and I think that's so important because I think often we make assumptions using our own lens, bias, or our own stories, and we think we understand. But in reflecting it back and saying, well, let me make sure I understand, you know, or what I heard you say is, then they can come back and say, actually, no, that's not what was important about that. It's actually over here.
That's right. And so people who've had a little more practice or have some help with how to listen a little bit better will get more of that right and do that more often. When you learn how to anchor that to where you are in the story and stay on the main path, it becomes incredibly powerful. Now you're not just repeating little snippets back, but really the thread. And then you're on the path together. Now you're not just watching the movie, you're in the movie with the person. And when you're in the movie with them, you're feeling what they're feeling, and empathy follows. We think that we have to show up and be empathetic, when in fact, when we show up and we listen in a different way, the empathy happens after we listen and while we listen. So that's part of that connection. But when we're only retaining 17 to 25% of what we hear, it's really hard. It's a lot of pressure to repeat back because we don't hear it all. So what the tools do for people is it helps them relax, because the tools do the work. Just like if I use a hammer versus my fist, I'm going to have a much better time putting the nail in the wall, right?
Right. So the flashlight is the first thing to reflect back, to get to align. It sounds like that's where you get your alignment. We're on the same page. You're walking alongside the person now.
That's right.
And what next?
Yeah, and you said it, right? We have our own biases and we contaminate the story. Just like you're on the trail, you need fresh water. You can't possibly carry enough with you. Your backpack's already heavy enough when you're hiking. So you need a water filter. And so one of the things I asked you was, do I get you? Right? Not just do I understand, but do I get you? This is what we call the water filter. Now I've repeated the story back, and I've repeated what I think the meaning is. And when I ask you, let me see if I get you, Kathryn. And that's when you're going to feel more intuitively and personally connected versus just factually connected. And now not only are we aligned, we're connected, because you're either going to say, you sure do, or you're going to tell me more, which is going to open up even more of the conversation. We're going to go deeper. Either way, it's a win. And now we're really letting things unfold together.
Okay. So now we're aligned. We're connected, and at least I think we are. And it sounds like then you confirm back to me that we're aligned and connected. Where do we go now?
Well, now we can start solving the problem.
Okay.
Right. And so, and sales is problem solving, relationships are problem solving. Do you want to tell your kids, be careful of this out in the world, that out in the world? You just start telling them it's not going to work. You start making sure you get them first. They're going to be more inclined for you to, now you go, may I tell you what I think? May I tell you what I think you should do? Right. And then you get a permission slip. Most times people will say yes, even your kids. Yeah. Now you understand me. Now I don't have to fight about that. Now we can talk about how to work together to solve the problem. So you become on the journey of healing and problem solving and connection. You earn the right to have a different way to work out the problem together.
Wow, it sounds incredibly powerful, especially as you mentioned kids. The asking for permission, because so often, like you said, we come in over the top down and say, this is what I think you should do, as opposed to going, well, are you interested? Because I know for my kids, if they get a choice, they're much more likely to say yes versus I'm going to tell you what I think.
Well, and the human condition of children and teenagers is to not feel understood. They feel their experiences are unique, and we know they're not because we lived those experiences. So we have to come from the perspective of, let me understand your uniqueness, and rather than thinking we already know, which is knowledge is the enemy of listening, by the way. Knowledge is a big enemy. I've already experienced it. Like I say, I live in Philly. I've already been to the Liberty Bell. I'm not going there again, right? I don't need to see it again. I'm not curious about it. I've seen it before. If I'm a tourist and I come in, I'm like, wow, look at this. Look at the markings. Look at the crack. Look at this. We lose the lens of, because of familiarity and knowledge, we lose the lens of, let me understand what I see in front of me.
Yeah.
So the tools allow that you don't have to remain curious. The tools will help you be curious.
Oh, I love that you mentioned curiosity, because that's exactly it. Like knowledge totally tampers curiosity and that beginner's mind, and starting fresh and going, actually, I don't know what's here because this is a new moment, even if I've been here before,
That's
or
right.
think I know what's happening. This is so great. We've got some questions coming in, and I want to go to them and then circle back and find out what else you've got for us. So it looks like Ronald is it Ronald? Oh, we've got several. Ronald, go for it.
Hey, this was really great conversation, and I'm just really want to really add a comment, because I experienced for the first time, listen to understand, last Saturday, literally Saturday. I was in a group, in a main group at church, and that was the guy that was speaking, really brought it up, and one of the things he says, we're listening from experience and we listen to response. The best listening is the listen to understand. And ever since, that was like, I had a wow moment, literally a wow moment. And I started really, prepare myself to listen to understand in most conversation as of last Saturday.
Wow.
So I was just wanted to make it, just really acknowledge the power of listening to understand, as opposed to listen to rebuttal, because we rebuttal based on experience, and we don't even listen what we're supposed to listen to, because as the person starts speaking, your experience kick in, and you started thinking, what am I going to respond based on experience, based on past? So
and very often, to be helpful, by the way, this is the other thing. This is why I say we blame the listener and it's not their fault. So often our experiences has been our own teacher. So we want to pay that forward and be helpful. And even towards being helpful, we don't realize that we're interfering with the connection by, again, jumping into telling. So it's not that the intent is always bad. It's just that we don't know how to do it, right? So that's amazing to me that created a shift. We had a client a couple of weeks ago say that he's been using the listening path tools with his 3.5-year-old, and now the 3.5-year-old is listening differently with him using these same tools. And so to me, that's everything. That's just because he said now they're in the car. Now the 1.5-year-old is also more engaged. They're not on the videos as much. He said, sometimes I have to make stuff up because they keep wanting to know more and go more, and they're having much more conversation. These little babies are having different kinds of conversations.
I love that. I love that. Thank you, Ronald. Thank you for that. Gio.
Okay, great. This has been phenomenal. Thank you. I wanted to ask you as a student of communication, right, and also a trainer, what is the biggest challenge you have that someone who's been in the field for so long and training others, what's the hurdle that you're constantly having to, maybe you don't have any, but that you're constantly having to reinvent yourself, recreate yourself, or go back to, so that communication happens around you?
It's a great question.
So the biggest hurdle I face in terms of helping others do this work, you mean?
No, your
Yeah.
communication, your own life.
Oh, well, so it can be lonely when you're the one listening a lot, frankly, if I'm being honest. I've had to learn that, this is so powerful that sometimes I have to, and I tell other people this as well. We have, listening is a gift. It is a gift, and the expectation is not that you will get that in return. It does work that way sometimes. But if you're hoping that others will listen in return, that's not an automatic because they don't have the skill. So probably for me, the struggle is to realize that, I have to talk more sometimes so that I also get listened to, because when it's an unselfish act and it's just inherent in me to do that. So that's a good problem to have, because I love listening to people and hearing their stories. And it brings a lot of, especially, I wrote about this in the preface, that it's part of the healing process for some of the things that were difficult about my childhood in this gift, is that helping others connect has just been such a powerful gift in my own life. So I'm grateful for that.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for the question, Gio. I
Thank you.
can relate to that and the loneliness. And I'm loving that you name that,
Yeah, I mean, self-awareness is dark sometimes, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's only in the self-awareness. It's a beautiful thing, but it's also, you kind of wish others had that muscle as well. And we're not all, obviously this group here is working on that all the time. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Tom.
Christine, good morning. Thank you. This is really insightful. I wanted to ask you more specifically on retention. I think I follow what you're saying as to the connection or the relatedness between listening and retention. You can't have retention if you don't have the listening and the development of common understanding. It seems that then through the retention, maybe that gives you a better starting point to keep the permission open. But could you just talk more on retention and what that requires, or maybe what it allows going forward?
So for me, I think the reason people have such a hard time retaining what they hear is because they don't have a map of what they're hearing. So imagine like somebody's telling you a joke, right? And they tell it and it's all over the place. It doesn't have a thread. It's really hard to remember how to repeat that joke, right? So we're naturally wired to learn in stories, but we're not, and to want to hear stories, to retain things, learn things, but we're not natural storytellers. So as the listener, when I say being the guide, you have to help the person that's talking be the storyteller so that you can thread how they tell that story and then retain it. When you have the map, that allows you to do that so that it's much easier to remember. In the absence of that, you're going to be as confused as the teller, and it's going to be all over the place, and it's going to be a lot harder to remember what you hear. That's why you need to know where you are on that path.
Okay, thank you.
That's really helpful. That's really helpful in terms of knowing the path. What I was asking earlier about why do I need to have this? It's really helpful that it does speak to retention. Thanks for that, Tom. All right, we've got time for one more, Sorrel.
Good morning, and thank you, Christine. This has been phenomenal. I come from an engineering background, and I love processes. I love details, and I can hear myself falling into the trap of seeing the pathway as a strategy or a process to follow. And I'm wondering, for you, is there a difference between the strategy and the process to follow, or a place to come from, or a way to be in a conversation? Could you say a little more about that?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you brought that up because first of all, I love me an engineer. I do. So, and part of, so I'm dyslexic. I've learned later in life, and I think in pictures, so that helps with this. But I also, as a skill builder, know that a process is easier to follow. So the more process oriented you are, the faster you will learn how to follow the listening path. That's how it's designed. That if you follow the process step by step, the insight will come to you. Now there's the next level where we get into a little bit more art, but once you have it's like learning the notes of the piano. You need to know A, B, C, D, E, F, G before you can play a song. So you need to have the tools on the path as your main notes before you start to improvise. So I had a client say, this works every time I remember to use it, every time. So that's the hard part. The easy part, the simple part, is to follow the process. The not so easy part is to practice it, because we have to unlearn what we've already learned. So you're speaking the right language here. Follow the process to the T, and you will have a different conversation emotionally as well as factually, Sorrel.
Thank you, Christine. You know, I'm taking away, don't fret, follow the process, and you'll be a listener in following the process over and over.
That's right. I believe I think we're overcomplicating things. And so I really, I was an athlete by, design early in my life. I was a softball pitcher. I taught myself how to throw a softball. Nobody ever showed me. You just have to figure out how to do it in the simplest way. And the best coaches I've had have always done that. So even developing emotional intelligence, I think we can overcomplicate that. And I was the athlete that didn't like to run, but if you threw the ball, I would chase it all day and get in shape. So listening is a way to understand yourself, because you have to listen to yourself as well as to others, which the byproduct of that is you raise self-awareness as well as other awareness, which is the foundation of EQ, or emotional intelligence. So I think we can look at all these arduous exercises, and sometimes all we need to do is throw the ball and start running after it, and we will get in shape. So the reason my company's called Equipped is that we're equipping organizations with the emotional skills. The foundation of those skills, I believe, is listening. That's the foundation of the house.
It's so good. Thank you so much for that. I feel like we could talk for hours about this, and I would still learn so much more. I've put Christine's contact information in the chat. Feel free to be in touch with her. And thank you so much for coming on. This has been so helpful. My wheels are turning about different ways and what I can learn from somebody and how I can be in better connection with them and relationship. So thank you for the gift that you've given us.
Well,
today.
I appreciate the opportunity to share the story. We're on a listening mission. We want to change the paradigm of communication from talking, telling, and knowing to listening, and have time and resources from early education to executive programs, teach people how to listen in a transformative way.
I love it. So check out her information, check out her website, and she's just come out with her game, and the book came out last year. It's all really good stuff. We are going to end today, like we always do, with our 7 tenets given to us by Patty Dabrowski. And I feel like so much of what Christine is saying is in the realm of love. Love thyself, love others. And in doing that and listening, it is a gift of love and caring. So go out and see how much you can listen to someone else using some of these tools and spread the love. And laugh out loud. Some of these stories are going to be funny, so you get to laugh.
Absolutely.
Enjoy. And stress less, eat more plants, and sleep your 7 hours. Eating more plants will help your body, and sleeping those 7 hours will help you to stress less. So give of your time and your resources and your love and your energy. And my very favorite, we got to move that body. Move what your mama gave you. Get out there and move. We'll see you all tomorrow, Thursday, on the Daily Huddle. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. And Christine, hang out for just a little while longer. We'll see everybody else tomorrow.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good job. Thank you.